Greetings and welcome to our Wednesday evening Conscious Conversation service at Unity of Tustin. I'm Reverend Clive de Laporte. I am blessed this evening to welcome you and to thank you for joining us online and blessing us with your presence and participation in our service this evening. This evening we are so blessed to have a conscious conversation with Valerie Sheppard. Valerie was our speaker this past Sunday in our meditation garden service. And Valerie blessed us with a teaching on why do you see things that way? Why do you see things that way? Valerie shared insight and inspiration with us on the power of perspective and, of course, perception. And tonight, we are so blessed to take that conscious conversation into a deeper understanding. Join with me now as we open our minds and our hearts and set the consciousness for this evening in an opening prayer. In the awareness of divinity and our oneness in spirit, we open our minds and our hearts tonight to the blessing of insight and inspiration. We claim for one and all a deeper understanding on the power of perspective and the perception it brings to our human life experience. We claim a blessing of insight and inspiration as we transcend our limiting beliefs and explore more fully the infinite potential and possibility of divine consciousness. We claim that blessing for one and for all. Thank you, God, and so it is. Every Wednesday evening in our Conscious Conversation service, we are blessed by the music videos of a variety of New Thought musicians. And tonight is no different. Our opening video is This Prayer's for You by Rich Fagan, Chris Clark, and Richard McDeesey.
Somebody hurting, someone needs a hand. There's someone out there somewhere suffering. No matter what it is you're going through, this prayer's for you, this prayer's for you. If you've lost a loved one or lost your way, if you find yourself without a place to stay, yeah, no matter what it is you're going through, this prayer's for you, this prayer's for you, for you. Beautiful spirit, sweet child of love, you are whole and you are worthy, and you are always enough. All your troubles and your sorrows now are washed away. With you, my friend, I pray. There's somebody hurting, someone needs a hand. There's someone out there somewhere suffering. No matter what it is you're going through,
Thank you, Richard McDeesey, for the blessing of that song. We take time now to light the 12-power candle for the month of September, the final time that we do that for this month, invoking the awareness of the power of order. We claim the power of order and the faculty, ability, and power for us to come into conscious awareness of divine flow in us and in our lives. We claim the blessing of that awareness for every name on our September prayer list. We encourage you to let us know of your need of prayer. You can do that by going to our website, unitytustin.org. You can do that by following our links on our Facebook page for pastoral care. You can do that by submitting an email to minister@unitytustin.org or calling the office during office hours on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Myself as minister and our prayer chaplain team and our silent prayer team are here to serve you in prayer and pastoral care. Our inspirational reading for this evening comes from the Daily Word for Wednesday, September the 23rd. And the word is comfort. The affirmation, God's love comforts me. God's love comforts me. I turn to prayer for comfort and solace, especially during times of grief and loss. Whether the loss pertains to a job, an outcome, a relationship, or a death, I am gentle with myself as I proceed in my grief. My mind and heart may grasp for reasons why. I may never know, but I soothe myself with remembering that I can find comfort in the spirit within. I feel blessed. I am safe exactly as I am in the process of my grief and mourning. If I need to cry, I do so freely. However I express my emotions throughout the transitions in my life, divine love envelops me and supports me. As I accept change and loss as part of the human experience, I emerge from this experience more confident and strong, knowing that God is in all, through all, and as all. The sacred text for this evening's reading, Psalm 27, verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold in my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Again, the word is comfort, and the affirmation, God's love comforts me. We bless those comforting words. We open our minds and our hearts to receive the insight and inspiration from this evening's reading, and I invite you to join me now in a time of meditation. Divine awareness awaken within us, the realization of oneness with Spirit, God, and Christ. Open-minded and open-hearted to the inspiration and impression of Spirit, we invite a deeper understanding of the power of perspective and perception in our lives. Taking a moment to invite the body to relax and the mind to become quiet and calm. Turning your awareness to your heart space and inviting the heart to open. In that opening, feel a releasing of all that hinders a perspective and perception of divine truth. Invite a heartfelt releasing of all ideas and beliefs centered in error. Feel a cleansing of the heart space, renewing and refreshing. Feeling wholehearted and open-hearted to divine truth and good. Let us find ourselves in the oneness of this attitude and intention. Let us find ourselves empowered in the presence of Spirit. And in that presence of Spirit, let us come together now in the sacred space of silence. Coming back from the silence, return to the awareness of your heart space. Again, the empowering feeling of gratitude and thankfulness for the releasing of error and the receiving of the perspective and perception of divine truth. Thank you, God. And so it is. That brings us to our next music video. We Are Unity, Words and Music by Richard McDeesey.
I'm one with you, you're one with me. Together we are unity.
Thank you, Richard McDeesey, and the choir, the Unity Worldwide Ministries choir, I believe, for the blessing of that song, We Are Unity. Yes, we are. And in our unity, we find our oneness and our human family and community. That brings us to the highlight of our Conscious Conversation service this evening, a time in conscious conversation with Valerie Sheppard as we take 20 or 22 minutes to explore more deeply her Sunday teaching of why do you see things that way. Good evening, Valerie, and thank you so much for joining us this evening at Unity of Tustin and being a part of our Wednesday evening Conscious Conversations service.
Thank you so much, Reverend Clive. I'm so delighted and honored. It's really, really my pleasure to be here.
It's a blessing for me too. When I was going through a list of possible invitees to invite to join in this new format of what we do on Wednesdays, the staff here, especially Daryl and Mary Jean, made very clear to me that I had to invite Valerie Sheppard, and so I'm blessed to have you here this evening. Valerie, if we can begin by jumping right into your Sunday talk this past Sunday and have a conversation this evening, bringing all of us into a deeper understanding on the topic and title, Why Do You See Things That Way? How Perspective Shapes Our Life Experiences.
Thank you. The talk title came to me as a part of the conversations that I'm having right now, or the conversations that I'm observing. And a quick little story. I watched recently a documentary about the fire at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And I've been there a couple of times, and I watched in horror. I mean, here it is more than a year and a half later. And I was still mesmerized as though I was one of the thousands of people on the street all through Paris looking up at the spire when it fell and the orange smoke and all of that stuff. And what it really brought home to me, like I was riveted and I was there. And this is happening all over the world right now, especially in the United States, where we're watching the right and the left and all these different conversations happening. The bystander gets as much energy from the dynamic of what's going on as the people who are right in the middle of it. So the people who are, my perspective, I'm right, you're wrong, like all of that happening, there are people around, their energy off-gassing from these people, like Pigpen in Charles Schultz. I have Pigpen in my book. And we're all affected. And so what makes the difference between how I see that spire falling as like horrific and somebody else sees it falling like, well, it's been around for almost 1,000 years. If it burns, it's not a big deal. And that's our perspective. And that felt like worthy of something to dig into, especially now.
Wonderful. I see that so closely aligned with our unity, faith, and philosophy. One of my favorite spiritual teachings is to bring people into the mindfulness of the gap between stimulus and response, right? Mm-hmm. That place, that human place that separates us from the fight or flight, freeze or freak out options we normally have in our animal nature and in our ego nature. And I love that you bring it back to the idea of perspective, because that precedes perception, doesn't it? The view you take on something determines how you see it and then, of course, how you respond or react to it. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. I do agree with that. And like we experience something, and then our interpretation is driven by that whole background. I think of perspective as the background or the foundation on which my interpretation grows. The seeds of my interpretation are planted in this soil called perspective, and perspective is grown in us. It's part of our conditioning, and our conditioned pattern of response is sometimes in that reptilian brain, the limbic brain, the fight, flight, or freeze or freak out. I've not heard the freak out before. And then how do we get back that pause that you're talking about? How do we get back to the fourth F or the fifth F, which however many, which is flow? Like that's the state of being of who we truly are.
Yes.
When we're connected into source and when we're connected into our deeper selves. Like how do we get back from watching something in this moment and jumping to our reptilian response? I think in heart math, it's called like a freeze frame. Like, whoop. Let me just check in for a minute. Where is this? I'm leaning in. I've got ferocity in my energy. Where's that coming from? And is it really real in this moment?
It's, I'm getting a little excited about our conversation this evening. I hope that's coming through, because for me, this is where the rubber meets the road. One of my guiding teaching principles is don't be so spiritually minded that you're not any earthly good. Okay? So we want to find ways where our spirituality, metaphysical or mystical, actually benefits us in our everyday physical and material lives. And this is a conversation that I think blesses us with that insight and inspiration. For me, there's great power in pausing, just taking a moment to sit in that gap between stimulus and response. And in Unity, we teach that in every human soul, and you might be familiar with this, in every human soul, there is the divine nature, the divine consciousness of the Christ, which is the ideal of the divine. And that ideal, that image and likeness, shows up in 12 faculties, abilities, and powers. And so when you're in the pause, you're in the divine now, and you have an option to just take a moment and ask yourself a question. What's really going on? And how is this an opportunity for me to better experience and express my divinity rather than to freeze, flight, freak out, or whatever the now growing F's are. And therein is our true transformation, correct? Valerie?
I'm just practicing the gap. Yeah, I'm just allowing.
Please don't do that.
I'm allowing what you're saying to hang out in my cells before my mental faculty wants to respond. There is a lot in what you said. So the first is I love the 12 powers. I'm a practitioner. And one of the ways that I practice is I use the Unity sent a calendar. This is like a couple of years ago. I still have it. And it had little cutouts for each month. And I put them on my refrigerator and I read them all month long and remind myself that I'm more than this human being that's running around trying to get success and money and prosperity and love life and all that stuff. And I remind myself to ground in my higher nature, which is these 12 powers. So I'm really connected to what you're talking about, the 12 faculties of the higher dimensions of man. I totally agree with the idea that the pause for me is an opportunity to get to come consciously present in this moment, and to get not control over, what I call and what I teach as get superiority over my lower faculties, right? That we have a vital self, we have an emotional self that is going to be in operation at all times. That's part of how we were created by the Magnificent, right? That is part of the essence of us. So if we are at once this spiritual, this integrated spiritual human person, then the way that I bring the most of myself into any situation, the way that I live out the truth of who I am, is to make sure that I'm integrating at all times. And I know for myself that as when I'm caught up in the emotional energy or the triggers that have happened from the dynamics of the situation, it's just the situational dynamics. But when I'm caught up in those, I have walked away from the spiritual side of the integrated spiritual human that I am. And I've weighted all of my response, all of my interpretation, all of my experience on one piece of me. And it's not the highest version of me. And so I asked myself, like in the teaching that I'm doing, one of the things that I've done as a spiritual counselor and in my book and in my practice is I don't feel in integrity if I'm not doing the work myself. Like I have a spiritual counselor, I see him every week, I do my own work. And so for me, it's like I watch myself. What are you doing, Valerie? And it's not about being better than the person to my left or right. It's about being the highest and best version of myself this moment, and hopefully that's better than the one I was being last moment. And so this whole idea of, can I consciously choose? Like we're talking in the gap, to me, the gap is the moment where I can actually bring my conscious choice into effect and be the causal nature of Valerie working in co-creation with the divine, instead of being at effect to whatever's going on out there.
I'm just practicing the pause.
Yes. Doesn't it feel sweet?
Well, I'm kind of feeling what you felt. That was, I would guesstimate there were 3 books maybe in there of about 300 pages each, possibly 350. It's a very powerful practice, Valerie. I sense that we're going to have to revisit this conversation, maybe in a series of conscious conversations. I'm going to sow that seed in the soil of possibility now between the two of us. And then respond to what you said earlier. One of the powers of the 12 powers, and they happen in divine order, there's a reason why they are ordered from faith all the way through to life at the end, because it is the mission and ministry of the Christ, according to the Apostle John. I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. John 10:10. So the whole sequence, the whole ordering of the 12 powers begins with faith and strength, wisdom, love, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, elimination, and life. They all lead to this ultimate crown pinnacle experience of experiencing and expressing the divine life as in your Christness, and having it more abundantly. But the power of power, which is right in the middle there, is a very interesting one. And the power of power, it follows imagination and understanding and precedes will, right? And will is our ability to make a decision, to be determined, to be committed, and to execute the good that we, through the power of power, have realized our authority and dominion, right? not so much control, but we are able through the power of power to claim our authority and to claim our divine dominion. And oh boy, you know, we need to have a two-way conversation. So don't get me started on the 12 powers.
But you know, this concept that you just said, Reverend Clive, about dominion, to me feels parallel or synonymous with the idea of superiority, which means I'm able to exercise that which I know is true at the deepest levels, even in a moment of, you know, freak out. So to me, I love the idea of the pause. And I also love the idea of, can I bring the energy that I get from the pause, the knowingness that I get from the pause, the connection to divine intuition that I get from the pause, into a moment where the pause is a millisecond. Like when I have to act and I don't have a time to actually take seconds and elongate them, but I actually have to shrink them because something is calling for me to go at this moment. And so can we help, inspire, encourage, teach people to bring that pause by practicing the longer pause and the experience of what they get in the longer pause? Can they bring it into a conversation that is about what is right and wrong with our society? Can they bring it into a conversation about why this candidate or that candidate isn't the right thing? Can they bring it into a conversation about how racial inequality or social justice is a problem today? I mean, can they bring it into a conversation about the movie they saw that they thought was good and the other person hated?
Well, so you touched on that earlier as well, when you use the analogy of being integrated, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, and in fact, more often than not, the pause is nothing more than to come back into the integrity of spirit, right? Because the word integrity comes from being integrated. When you are integrated in spirit, in mind, in heart, in body, you are in integrity. So often one of the ways that we experience the power of the pause is not to be too mindful and intellectual about it. It's just simply a centering practice, right? A moment where you take an inhale and an exhale and you let sense consciousness go and you center yourself in the awareness of oneness and you invite the higher consciousness, the consciousness of the divine, to become your perspective and your perception of the life experience in front of you. And then you release the ego and the sense consciousness, and with that goes the need, the scarcity mentality, which is usually the initiator of the flight or fight or freeze or freak out response, right? And now you're centered in this place where you find peace and poise, and in this pause you are in authority and dominion of the kingdom of God, which is the consciousness of God, and that consciousness is now yours, and that consciousness precedes anything that you think, feel, say, and do. And now you come back from that space with integrity, integrated in spirit, mind, heart, and body.
Okay, that was a mic drop moment. So what you just said, I'm going to drop the mic.
Yes, but you know, if you, and I sincerely appreciate that, Valerie, but being a guy, can I get a blue mic instead of that purple, pink thing that
Sorry, I only have this one.
No, I've got a reputation.
I so resonated with I mean, that was so deep and so beautiful. And what I love about living this, you know, that's what I think of when I think of unity. And what you're saying in this conversation is, I tell my students all the time that where the rubber meets the road is called embodiment. And it does you no good to have all this intellectual ability to debate and decipher and discern if you can't also live it, express it, breathe it, stand in it, own it as you. Like, you know, I'm always saying Sam, Sam, Sam all day long. And people are like, what is that? And it's speak as me. Like I'm invoking the divine energy that I am to speak as me, to be integrated, to remember that's who I am. I don't have to try and figure it out. I just have to stand in it and allow it to come forth within me. It's already there. So can it just come forth as a part of my expression in the world, and my expression in the world is connected to my perspective, my interpretations of what's going on around me and what's going on in me. When I interpret that I've been hurt, I feel bad and there's pain coming and I feel like really sad and look what you did to me. Like I have to like, hold on a minute. What happened was that something that's still alive in me potentially from way back when got triggered in this moment, and I'm using the person in front of me or the dynamic in front of me or the situational experience that I'm having as my scapegoat instead of taking responsibility for that. Oh, wow, something alive in me does not feel good. What's there to do about that? What is calling forth from me, to me, for me, about me, in order for me to get that dominion that brings my life back into alignment, where all the magic and miracles and mysteries and mysticism, I love that, where all of that is for my highest good. And how do I bring my highest self into those moments in order to experience my highest good? Woohoo!
You know, I would like to also woohoo that. Give that a woohoo encore, maybe.
Yes, I love it. Oh, wait, we got to give an over.
You know, I'm sorry that I didn't come with any props. I will remember. I will remember to bring something next time.
Awesome.
I'd love for you, in closing, as we take a few more minutes, I'd love to get your insight on this idea. In the gap between stimulus and response, talking about the power of perspective and perception and how it positions us to how we see things and therefore process that experience. And it turns out to be the decisions that we make in our lives. And if these become habitual, that's our destiny, right? So our perspective can become a habitual way of thinking, and that determines our habits become the things we just do unconsciously, and that gives us a path and a destiny in life. And I have always found if you need to break that cycle, if you need to redirect your destiny in the power of the now, that using the question and the root word of the question, which is quest, fulfills the scripture that says ask and receive, right? So when something is happening to you in the here and the now, you can simply ask yourself some questions to reorientate yourself to the truth of what's happening, rather than getting sucked in to the unconscious habit or habitual thinking or feelings that you have established every time you see a fire truck or you are in a public restaurant and you've had a bad public restaurant experience. And so tonight, I'd like to, encourage our viewers and people that are watching our sharing is to live in that gap between stimulus and response. Use the power of question to reorientate themselves away from perceived reality to true reality. And I'd like to share some of the questions that I use. For instance, where am I? Get some situational awareness. Where am I? Am I here, or am I back in a past experience that I'm bringing up while I'm standing in the here and now? What's going on?
more situational awareness. What is going on in this very moment? Question number 3, what are my guiding ideals? What are my guiding values? What are my guiding principles? And question number 4, how is this an opportunity to experience and express that? Now, there's a lot of thinking going on there, and there's a lot of intellectual. It can also be heart-centered. But once you get into the habit of doing that, it's less than a minute, right? But it breaks that cycle of stimulus, trigger, response.
I love the pathway and that it's filling that pause with some mindful consciousness developing catalysts to what is going to be my next action. So yes. I was raised by a family who always said, think before you speak. Yes. And so I'm used to doing that. I don't do it as well when I'm triggered, right? So it's funny. People can often hear these teachings as, well, I do that all the time. Okay, so what we're really talking about is when we're triggered and the perspective is a runaway train and the response is not a response, it's a reaction. And I'm in a knee-jerk reaction. And so what I would add to what you're saying is it does increase the extent to which we are actually embody it. And what I think of when I say embodiment is it becomes second nature. Like it's second nature to check in and notice, oh, this is coming from me right now. Quick story, I was having a difficult conversation with a client. And she was saying the way I had said something had created this disturbance in her and she wasn't feeling very good. And so, automatically I go into defensive mode, like, oh my God, why did you think of it that way? I'll always, like, I could hear myself defending, protecting, I've got to show her that I'm not what she's thinking I am. And as soon as I could hear that come up, I was like, oh, who's that? I literally am like, well, I'm looking at her on the Zoom screen. Literally, this was yesterday. So I'm looking at her on the Zoom screen and I could hear this defensiveness. And I took a breath, like to your point, I wasn't asking the exact same questions that you just offered, but I was in a moment of, where are you, Valerie? Like what you're about to do has nothing to do with this moment. This is a divine being sharing where she is, her perspective of you. It's not an accusation. You're not in danger. How can you respond in a way that shows what you really feel for this person? Love and compassion, and that you cherish this relationship. Like, it's not about winning. It's not about convincing. It's not about persuading. In this moment, it's about, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that anything I did or said came across that way. Let's just take a moment and reconnect on a different level and then have a conversation about what you're experiencing that was triggered. And I use the word triggered, was triggered by whatever I was being. And the bottom line was, we got to a place where I got to look at myself, how am I being me? Who am I being when I think I'm being me? I love that question. That's one of the questions I ask my students all the time. Who are you being when you think you're being you? Where's that coming from? And then she actually got a chance to see herself and actually came to a place where she could say, I notice I've just had a really big epiphany. I notice what I do when I feel scared. Because I ended up asking her, like, do I remind you of somebody who you maybe had a bad experience with? Because I'm not trying to do that.
Right.
And it ended up in a very good place. So I guess what I'm saying, it's a little bit of a long winding road to, yes, the more we do it, and I would say do it all the time. Like I practice it in really positive conversations, like you saw me practice it in this conversation. Just practice it It doesn't have to be a difficult conversation, but even practicing it all the time makes it available to you more of the time. When there's positive stuff unfolding and when it's the heat of the moment, and you owe it to yourself. Well, yeah, you owe it to yourself and to the planet in terms of what you're here to create. What did you come here for? And I guarantee you it wasn't to be right about a candidate and their perspective. It wasn't about that. So how can you bring what you came here to be into that conversation and forget about winning or convincing or persuading or getting the upper hand? Just be that. Let the rest of it be God's.
Wonderful. So that brings us all the way back. Well, firstly, thank you for highlighting the important distinction between reacting to something and responding to something, right? There's an instinct, an animal instinct to reacting, and there's a higher consciousness and mindfulness and orientation with values, principles, and ideals to responding to something. I remember one of my ministerial mentors teaching me the 3-day rule, right? The 3-day rule, he said to me, often in life, apply the 3-day rule. Take 3 days before you respond to something. And I have found that in applying that rule to many of life experiences, things that I would in day one think, this is terrible, this is challenging, it's unfair, why is this happening? By day 3, the perspective and perception of that thing has changed and evolved and unfolded so dramatically that I'm quite excited with the challenge and the opportunity that has presented itself to me. Valerie, thank you so much for blessing us this evening with your insight and inspiration on the power of perspective and perception, and also for the blessing of your Sunday service and your talk in our garden meditation service. I personally look forward, hopefully, to many more of these conversations with you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Clive. I'm grateful for being here. I love Unity. It's my church home, and I'm happy to contribute in any way I can. Thank you so much.
Our gratitude and thanks once more to Valerie Sheppard for the blessing of her company, her insight and inspiration. We look forward, Valerie, to seeing so much of you in our Meditation Garden services and our pre-recorded upcoming Unity of Tustin Facebook Live services. That brings us to our offering affirmation for this evening. And again, before we do the offering affirmation, a moment for me on behalf of myself and the board and the staff and the members of Unity of Tustin to thank you for your generous and ongoing support of Unity of Tustin as a ministry and a spiritual community. Your financial donations enable and empower us to continue fulfilling our spiritual vision and mission. A reminder that you can send donations to us either by going to our website at unitytustin.org and clicking on the Donate tab for access to a safe online platform to make a donation. You may also find links on our Facebook page to the same Shelby platform where you can make an online donation, or you can mail a check to our mailing address at Unity of Tustin. We thank you and invite you now to join us in the affirmation as we bless our offering this evening. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all I receive. Thank you, God, I am so blessed. And now for our final music video for this evening's service. The video is Rise by Faith Rivera.
Close my eyes, I open my heart, I'll take a deep breath, let the healing start. I lift my hands, I plant my feet, I let love in, I feel the beat that's calling us to rise, rise, Spirit rise up, rise in me. I let in my soul, I clear my mind, I'm here and now, in present time. The power of 1,000 suns lighting up the dark. Oh, we rise as one. Oh, rise, rise, Spirit rise up, rise in me. Oh, rise, Spirit rise up, rise in me, rise in me. I sing to you, you sing to me, change up this noise, makes me harmony. Come on and rise. Oh, rise, Spirit rise up, rise in me. Oh, rise, rise, Spirit rise up, rise in me, rise in me. Heart to heart, hand in hand, no turning back, onward to promised land. Do you feel the power of 1,000 suns lighting up the dark? Oh, we rise as one. Love's calling, calling out your name. Love's calling. That's why we came. Love's calling, calling out the name. Love's calling. It's why we came. Come on and rise, rise, Spirit rise up, rise.
Our gratitude and thanks again this evening to the musicians, the New Thought musicians who have blessed our service with music. We are ever grateful and ever thankful for your gifts and talents and your willingness to make those gifts and talents available to us as we reach out into the world with the unity faith and the unity philosophy. A few reminders before we close out our service this evening. A reminder that this Sunday we have our 10 a.m. Facebook Live broadcast, our celebration service online. We also have our 11 a.m. Meditation Garden Sunday service. That service is facilitated along CDC guidelines. We believe it is as safe as possible for you to attend in person, and we invite you to do that at 11 a.m. on Sunday. But of course, if you can't make it, we are also now broadcasting that service on our Facebook page as a live broadcast. Next Wednesday, our Conscious Conversation service will include one of our very own beloveds, William Dexter, or as we like to refer to William as Dexter or Dex. And Dexter will be joining me in a conscious conversation about race relationships and the unity, vision, and mission to co-create a world that works to the highest and best good for one and all. So encouragement to you to join us next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time on our Unity of Tustin Facebook page for a live broadcast of that service. And then finally, a reminder that we are having our annual members meeting online this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. Coming Sunday at 2 p.m. You will find links to that Zoom event in the e-blast on Friday and also on the Facebook page. If you have any questions, be sure to contact the office by telephone or by email before close of business on Thursday around 5 o'clock. And then a shout out to our Unity of Tustin Adventure in Faith program for October. We are blessed by the presence and participation of Reverend Robert Brummett, who will be facilitating the program for us and teaching from his book, Living Originally. Living Originally will be the theme of our Sunday services and our Wednesday evening 6 p.m. Zoom groups, study groups with Reverend Robert. We will also be expanding our weekday morning meditation services at 7:30 p.m. on our Facebook Live to incorporate a morning meditation weekdays for the month of October in our Adventure in Faith program. You are invited to bless us with your participation in that program for the month of October. And now let's join together in reciting our prayer for protection as a blessing for one and all. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Blessings to you again. Thank you for joining in this evening and being a part of our Wednesday evening Conscious Conversation service. Until we see you again, online or in person, please know that you are not alone, never alone. You are always and ever in our hearts, our uplifting thoughts, and empowering prayers.
are